The Music Retail Show.
All right, back for another episode. Richard, man, we're right in the middle of summer.
Yeah.
It's in the middle of July. It's freaking hot outside.
It's hot outside, yes.
It's been hot in the warehouse.
Although we have had a cool spell for the last couple of days, lots of rain.
Yeah, the rain's come
that is
through.
good.
Of course, my garden loves it. My tomatoes are growing good. My peppers are growing good. So, yeah, it's good. It's good.
Yeah.
It's good. But we got past NAMM. How do you think, just 2 seconds, how do you think that went? How do you think all that went?
Well, it's going to take me longer than 2 seconds. I, like I've spoke about before, am a fan of NAMM. Yeah. I know a lot of people, they can kind of go down a road of being a Debbie Downer, but I love NAMM. I love what it's about. I love the industry. I love seeing friends that I haven't seen in a long time.
Yeah, sure.
So I thought it was a huge success.
Yeah.
The new facility looks great. There was a lot of positive things going on, and man, I was excited. I was happy. Yeah.
Well, speaking of friends,
yes,
you've got an extremely good friend here today. This is Josh Touchton. He's joining us today on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So, why don't you take 2 seconds and maybe explain how you know this man?
Well, I've met Josh, and I'm trying to go through the timestamp of all this, but I know it was over 20 years.
Yeah, for sure.
It was probably 23 years ago out in Arizona when I worked retail. I worked in, and again, this isn't about me, so I'm going to be brief. I worked into what was a guitar shop, and turned into over half of the store was drums. And a big part of it was because of Josh. And Josh, starting out early on, was always very cool to explain the product. I mean, Mapex is where he was working at, and it was newer to me and newer to a lot of people in that area. But when we were said and done, we sold a ton of drums, and the community really embraced them. I actually bought a couple kits, and Josh was a big part of that. He was a big part of our success by information, his knowledge, and just on and on and on. So Josh has been a great friend. I'm super excited to do this one because we're not talking about guitars.
I know.
We're talking about drums.
Well, you said
so
that
I actually feel like the intelligent level has gone up a little bit.
Oh, man.
So
well,
that's just my opinion. But Josh, I'm excited for you to be here. I appreciate you doing this.
I'm thrilled to be here. It's I'm so glad to see just how both of us have progressed in the last 20. We'll just call it quarter century.
Yeah.
And that was a really interesting time because I looking back on my career and looking back on what you've done, they kind of mirror each other in a lot of ways. And looking back at that early point with Mapex, where it really was a brand that is one of the only brands that has stuck around for this long that
has done very well.
It's done extremely well, and not only in the States, but even a few years ago, I was working for another drum company, going around. I was in Eastern Europe. I was in Italy for about a week, and it dominated every store.
Really?
It was everywhere. It was everywhere over there. It was amazing, and there's some amazing distributors over there as well. But it's done great.
So, do you look back and do you go, "Wow, my footprint is right here"?
I don't know. I think there are so many people that have touched that brand since then. Mm-hmm. I'm very proud of what I was involved with, and when distribution shifted and it went away from Gibson because it was Gibson that was the distributor. We took Slingerland at that point, and for about 2.5 years, really pushed the Studio King stuff coming out of Nashville. Which, as I understand it, a lot of guys that have told me that the Studio King, other than the Radio King. All the Radio King stuff from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, that the Studio King has turned into some of the most collectible drums just in those few years coming out of Nashville.
Wow.
But then going back to Mapex in 96 and really trying to make it into a viable brand instead of just a brand that was distributed by Gibson, or I think earlier by Washburn. Or by Washburn then, rather. It's amazing to see what it became because everything shifted, and it was very designated lines within it. And now it's just kind of like every little bit of what they do. And I don't even work for the company, but I'm extremely proud of what they've done. Mm-hmm. Like the Saturn series became the Premier series.
I got one,
Things that we tried may not have flown the way that we wanted them to, but then they were folded into other like the Saturn became, something that was made with walnut, and the Orion went away, and then other things came in and were even better. I did too, and it's really cool to see the evolution of that company, and really to see the evolution of the drum industry. And there's some places where I think the industry has stumbled, but there are some places where the industry has really, shined.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to come back to Slingerland. It's on one of my notes down lower because I do want to talk about it. I'm interested in what's going on there, but I want to start off by we have an announcement. We meaning you. We have an announcement to make. One that I'm very excited for you about, and I'm very excited for the industry because I think it's gonna hopefully open up some new doors for not just you, but your team of people that you've probably haven't even met all of them yet.
Yeah.
And stores. There's going to be a lot of people affected in a very good way about this. So. Tell us, what do you got going on right now?
Well, for the last 5 years, I've worked for Marshall Amplification, helping with the Natal line. And
which Natal is a drum company.
Yeah, really. For
those
really,
that haven't heard.
Line's been around since 1965, percussion line up until about 2010 when Jim Marshall, who was a drummer, purchased the name from the original owner, Alan Sharp, and helped get that going here in the States, and really have gotten it to a point where I believe that KMC, who's the distributor now, can take it and go with it.
Okay.
And as of the 23rd of July, I'll be working for Ludwig.
Awesome.
And, I'm really thrilled about that.
Congratulations.
It's very bittersweet to leave Natal because I honestly love the drums. They're fantastic. I love the people.
They look good.
They're great. They're really great. And anybody who sits behind the kit, any of the kits, just falls in love with them. And this is a move that I'll be able to grow a little bit more, I think. Being a product director is great. I miss being in sales, honestly. I miss being involved with sales of a product. Even though I was selling, I wasn't the primary in that. I was really the product director.
Okay.
The brand is doing amazingly well in the UK because it's a hometown brand, and those guys are doing really, really well. But now that KMC's kind of got it rolling, I feel like the time for me to transition into something else and to help someone else. Hopefully, I think the time was right for me to be able to do that. So I'll be the director of sales for Ludwig for East of the Rockies.
Okay, and so what does that mean to anybody listening?
I'll be overseeing the growth of the brand on our side of the mountains,
our side of the pond.
And I'll be basically consulting and overseeing the work that the reps do.
Okay.
On this side of the country. And as well as having some key accounts myself that I'll take, which I'm really looking forward to that.
Well, that's good.
And that's really good. I think like Sweetwater and AMS and some of the bigger drum-only stores I believe I'll be in.
Now, so what does that mean? Are you going to be dealing with some of the product and maybe some of the new product or ideas of the product? Because I know you have a great brain for innovation. So. Yeah. How does that fit, or is...
I just said, I've got a great brain. I sure do. No, I think at this point...
You think you're talking to your wife, or every once in a while you'll go, I understand,
Oh,
there was a question?
Somebody going to hit me? No, at this point, I think the product that Ludwig has is heading in a real good direction. If they ask, I'd love to. I mean, I've been building drums for... gracious, over 25 years. And
I remember you telling a story you building shells in your kitchen. One of the first times I ever met you.
Oh my goodness, yeah. I rewrapped, oddly enough, a Ludwig and Ludwig in my kitchen in Nashville. My wife and I were trying to rewrap this kit because I really wanted this finish, and it was stupid. It was a horrible finish. And I did the whole thing wrong. And at the time, I was thinking, okay, this is how it should work. And we're guys, we don't really read directions. And this stuff came off within 2 days. The covering was peeling up and everything. And I think that kit actually belongs to Ken Coomer, who's an unbelievable session drummer. He played for Wilco for a long time, and he was Wilco's first drummer and played in played in Uncle Tupelo, played with Tim Finn, and just tons of different people. Amazing drummer. I think he's got that kit, and there have been a few times over the last few years that he's pointed out.
He just wanted a custom wrap on it?
No, it was for me.
Oh,
and I ended up selling it to him, and I think so that he could remind me throughout the years that I did a horrible job on my first drum wrapping. But yeah, I mean, I've always, for the bulk of my life, I've built drums, and I love doing that. And I've been very fortunate in that I know how to do that. So when I've dealt with artists that need a certain something, that I can do that. I was real fortunate to be able to work on one of Vinnie Paul's last kits.
Oh, cool.
Maybe not one of his last kits, but before I worked for Armadillo with D-Drum for a little bit, and I was able to build his Red Sparkle kit within the weeks before I left there to come help Natal.
Awesome. Yeah.
And of course, now that Vinny's passed on, it kind of becomes very real that, wow, some of the stuff I've done, I've done for people who aren't around anymore.
Yeah.
You kind of feel old, and you feel like, well, I was very honored to do that, even though I never even met him.
But I actually seen him at the Winter NAMM show the year before last.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you about that story later. I'm not going to share it here. It's nothing bad.
Well, good.
Anyways,
he was nice though.
He was a nice guy.
That's good. I and God rest him, and I feel horrible for his family.
Sure.
They've suffered a whole lot in the last decade and a half.
So back to the drums, not to interrupt you, back to the drums of design and stuff like that. You feel like today that's not what you're going to be needed for. Yeah.
Right. I think so. I think with what Ludwig has, I mean, of course, I'm honored to be working there.
Yeah.
And I'm really looking forward to the job. And I think kind of for me to go in and say, oh, I've got this great design. I don't think so. I think Ludwig's done pretty
Great
well
job.
without me for 110 years.
Yeah,
110 years. That's crazy.
Yeah, I think 110 years next year. And I mean,
I feel a new kit coming along for the Winter NAMM show.
110th anniversary.
Yeah.
Man,
so
I may need to get one. I've been itching to get a new drum kit.
Well, that's true. I mean, and you think about the bass drum pedal. Bass drum pedal.
The
it'll
Speed
be
King.
Speed King. Squeak King. You bet.
It's Squeak King.
But I love it. I mean, there's not a Zeppelin track that that could have been done without it.
Not to go crazy, but imagine if Bonham would have had a better pedal, not a state of the art pedal.
But that would have done away with the struggle. There's something that's missing today about the struggle. And one of my favorite things that I heard recently was Jack White talking about his old guitars that the necks are bent and twisted and stuff.
Sure,
and he
made him a
says
better player.
How much he loves the struggle. And there's something about the struggle that's disappeared.
It's too easy.
Yeah, it's almost too easy. And someone had asked me, well, you're rounding 50. Do you feel like it's going to be harder and harder on down? If you were to change jobs, it's going to be harder to find something. I said, I don't think so, because we know, in this industry especially, we know the struggle.
Yes.
And we appreciate the struggle. I think we respect that. And, all the drum companies I work for, I have nothing bad to say about any of them, because there was struggle, there was success. I think the whole drum side of the music industry is a struggle right now, but I think there's a respect for it. Like we were talking earlier about how reverence has kind of disappeared for certain things. Yeah. I think the reverence for the hard work that's gone in, I think needs to be appreciated.
Yes, yeah, and thankfully there is a group of people that they reflect. They've been in the industry long enough, so there's always that. And maybe that's where mine comes from, but I really respect the industry. I respect the product, the companies. Even if there's a company I don't really quote unquote like, I still respect what they're about and what they're, and I want them in the industry. I think we all need and it's good to have that in the industry.
And it's not just respect for the gear or the companies that are building the product, or that are, I should say, manufacturing the product, because there's a respect that I hope is not disappearing for the dealer, because I think a lot of people have tried to find alternate means to getting product, and they're not necessarily going in the stores as much as they used to.
Yeah.
That respect for the dealer cannot disappear. I think it'll be the failure of this industry if
Well, and you bring up a separate point that isn't in my notes, but I've talked about it before, is I honestly feel like the brick and mortar, there is going to be a comeback. It may not be what we've seen 20 years ago, because obviously we have online and we have other platforms to sell product, but I think there's a surgence of really, really good retailers that are out there and we're shaping new ones. So we will have great brick and mortar stores.
Yeah.
I think we're weeding out some of the bitter, jaded, and some of the negative types.
Right.
And that's what happens. It's like a recession. People complain about recession, and I'm like, sometimes recession's good because it eliminates those that don't need to be there.
Right.
And I think in the music industry, we have to be careful because we want everybody to be here. And sometimes they don't need to be. But I'm seeing a crop of what I feel is better dealers. So I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, I am too.
And that's exciting for me because I'm a fan of the brick and mortar store.
I totally am too. And I think the reason I say that, well, here's what I'll say. On my end of things, we manufacture the things, but we come up with the silly names for all the products.
Sure.
I'm the king of silly names. But it's the brick and mortar guys that have built the line.
Yeah,
We'll build the product.
They're doing the hard
They build
work.
the line.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And there's a massive amount of respect for that. And then, I think growing up, I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. And from the time I was 8 years old, I was going into a lot of these stores. I've known a lot of my great customers since I was 8.
Interesting.
Wow.
And,
That's very cool.
Kenny Stanton and Ed Magruder, Ed Hamrick. John Bond, who's at Kenny Stanton's now, he was at American Music. I don't know him well, but Pete Stroud, who's the guitarist for Sheryl Crow, and who's one of those guitarists that as soon as you hear it, it's Pete.
Yeah.
He was working at American Music when I was probably 14 or 15.
Really?
And I saw him at a NAMM show a couple years ago. He was in line to check out a Marshall Code amp, and I just walked up and went, "Pete?" And he goes, "Yeah." He was freaked out that anybody came up and talked to him. I said, "I have to tell you from the 15-year-old version of me, thanks for being so nice to me."
Aww.
And it was because of people like that that I kept going back. And my dad, and you'd never do this now. My son's 18, I wouldn't do this with him. But there was this long road in Atlanta that had probably 4 or 5 music stores. And my dad would drop me off on Saturday morning. Here's $5, walk the mile and a half to McDonald's, get yourself some lunch. I'll pick you up around 3.
Wow.
And I just walk around and go into all the stores.
That's a good story.
But I mean, that's,
and you would do that today.
I probably would.
Yes.
But that's how we grew up.
Yeah.
Was going in these stores. It wasn't getting online, and I want to turn into the old guy going, "I've never ordered," because I certainly use Amazon, and certainly I've tried to stuff.
Sure, you can't say the old guy because we're the same age. We're just 2 days apart.
Then I can say the old guy.
Which I am a little bit older, I think.
You got
2 days.
By 2 days.
22nd,
24th.
Okay, 4 days. I got
4
you.
days.
You got more
Your
wisdom.
birthday's in April?
Yeah.
I'm the 28th.
Look at
All
this.
right. Look at
See what's
this.
going on?
But I'm 15 years younger.
Right. So, so you just sit and bask in all
Sit down,
this.
boy.
But I mean, it was a hands-on thing.
Yeah.
You could go in and like now I could never buy a cymbal online.
No.
And that's just me personally. There are people that do it, and
I got to
people
listen
at
to
the
10
stores.
of them,
Yeah, well, like if someone goes to like Memphis Drum Shop, they've got this great cymbal site. Those guys can go in and pick exactly what you want, and they're great. Yeah, they'll know what to get, and they'll know the sound you're looking for and everything. So that's awesome. But if I was just calling somebody, I saw online you had this in stock, go ahead and send it. I couldn't do it.
Well, I can't do it either because cymbals is it's arguable if I like cymbals more than drums.
Yeah.
Because I mean, back in my retail days, I had a big horseshoe of cymbals. I had 3 different brands, and man, I can just play with cymbals all day long. I mean, I remember even the cymbals that I have today. I remember like crashes. Because I play the Peisty signatures, and I remember getting fast crashes in the signatures that I love, and I remember lining up all of them, and then just each one and going. I know I drove everybody nuts, so
but you got what you wanted.
I
think Zildjian did such a great job back in the '80s. There was an ad with Omar Hakim, and he was talking about picking out cymbals, and he mentioned in there he takes his own sticks. And I just thought, wow,
interesting.
That's a
drums
great idea.
Are drums the same way? Like, or are drums a little bit more precise, and it depends on the heads that you get?
Yeah, I think so. But I think modern drums are more consistent.
Okay.
And so for the vintage drums, and of course when we were buying vintage drums, I've said this a million times, they weren't called vintage, they were called used.
Yes.
And you just go in and grab stuff and figure out how to make it work. But now you go back and listen, and the glue has hardened, and the shells are drier, and you go back and you almost have to pick your vintage kit to find exactly what you want. But I think with modern stuff, the D-drum stuff, the Natal stuff, all that stuff that I worked with, the Mapex stuff, it's very consistent. It's very, very consistent. So you can trust what's coming out of those factories for a more modern sound.
Okay.
And I think with the Ludwig thing, the thing I'm excited about is the higher end stuff, the legacy mahogany, legacy maple, and the regular maple classics. Those are all made in the exact same molds that they brought down from Chicago.
Interesting.
So as I understand it, these are molds that go back to the 20s.
Wow.
So my 74 Super Classic versus my 58 WFLs are all
so my
coming out of the same
64
mold.
Champagne Sparkle
all came out of the same molds.
My 64 Silver Sparkle. Anyways, go ahead.
I know. I don't know.
Man,
we could go on, but
I love old drums.
I do too, man. And that's like an 8-hour show right there.
Yeah, me too.
My 9 round badge Gretsch snares.
I've got one to show you.
We're not listening to the boy over
Oh,
here.
it's so funny.
No, that gets
player.
ugly. That gets way ugly when we start talking about vintage drums and everything. But I think you're right. I think there's going to be a return of the brick and mortar guys.
Yeah.
But forever,
It's almost like there has to be eventually.
well, I think there does have to be. There's there are a lot of the dealers that in the 90s and early 2000s really worried about what was going on with Guitar Center and even recently with Sweetwater and everything else. I don't think there needs to be a concern, because if anything, those guys are marketing the product that they're selling.
They're promoting. Yes,
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's not enough dealers that feel that way, because I think a lot of times there's like I said, there's an age group that there's all this fear, but the younger ones are coming along. I view it, and I did this when I was working retail, when somebody, and I've shared this before, when they walked in with a magazine, I was like, cool, I get to sell something.
Yeah.
It's a competitor's magazine,
right?
But a guy just wants to buy it,
right?
He doesn't, and he's in my store,
yeah.
So if I do my job, I get to sell something.
Well, there's something about here and now too.
Yeah, touching. We talked about touching cymbals. Yeah.
I mean, that's really, really important. And growing up when we did, I think you had a guy that you trusted.
Absolutely.
You had a guy that you went to. And for me, it was Ed Magruder. And he was at Atlanta Pro. He was at Kenny Stanton, and or at Ken Stanton Music. And Ed would call me and go, "Hey, I got this in. You got to come down." I'd go down and figure out how I was going to pay for it and buy it. I've still got the Camco pedal that I bought from him when I was 14.
I want a Camco kit.
I do too.
I seriously look. I want two things, and then I'll turn it back over to you. A Silver Sparkle, a Champagne Sparkle Gretsch kit. And then I want a Camco kit.
Yeah.
Those are the two things that I want. Now I have, like I mentioned, a Ludwig Silver Sparkle or a Champagne Sparkle snare, but I don't have the kit.
Yeah.
But I want two kits, and then I'll be happy. But
I want
along with my other
16-inch WFL floor tom from 1958, right around there in black. If anybody has one, let me know. I've got the 13, the 22, no floor tom.
Oh, really?
I'll play that kit by itself too. It's so great. It's so great. But yeah, I want to round out that kit, and that's what somebody was saying. Well, when you go to Ludwig, you're going to pick out a kit. I'm like, you don't want me in there. Poor Ernie over in the factory is going to kick me out. So quick. But
have them make you a one that's like
that's all I want.
Out.
It's just it's just the floor tom. I don't even want a full kit. I just want the floor tom.
I have to keep my ears open.
Yeah,
for
please
one
do.
of those.
Please do. See, did I derail us? I think I probably
No. I think we're fine. So we were talking about brick and mortars.
Yeah.
So let's also talk about the retail side, and maybe you can give us information for. There's a lot of guitar shops, and a lot of this goes to guitar people. There's a lot of guitar people. So to keep their interest high, talk to us how we can get drums into guitar shops, because we have a lot of guitar players that go, man, I would carry drums. I just don't know anything about them, and the only way I can get into drums is if I hire somebody. Now, what's funny is I'm a drummer who sells guitars, so I believe a guitar player, some of them, can sell drums. Tell us about that.
Well, I think a salesman's a salesman. And, and I understand anybody that goes to work for a guitar store is, it's going to be assumed that they are a guitar salesman. Yeah. But a salesman's a salesman.
Yeah.
My dad, tremendous salesman. He was medical sales forever. And I remember when I got into sales, him telling me, look, you're not a X salesman. You are a salesman. You sell everything.
Yeah.
And I was fortunate enough to work for D'Addario for 10 years.
Yes.
And I was not a guitar guy.
Yeah.
A wonderful company. I was not a guitar guy, only a drum guy. I'm really just a drum tech. It's really all I am. And but to go in and have to learn, I think at the time maybe 5 or 6 different lines, one of which I knew, which was drum heads.
Evans,
which was Evans. And I think I had to learn all those other things. I couldn't go at the end of the month and go, well, here's what I sold. Sorry I didn't sell any guitar strings. I'm a drum guy. It doesn't fly. I think if someone wants to commit, if a store wants to commit to having a small drum section, which I think 3 drum kits is perfect.
Okay.
And it takes up room. I mean, if you've got a playable drum kit that's a 5-piece drum kit, you're looking at 36 square feet. That's a lot of room on the floor.
Yeah.
That's a lot of room on the floor. But if you can set one up and stack 2 beside it, you've got an opportunity because musicians travel in packs.
Yeah.
And so
a band,
absolutely. If somebody's on the road, they're going to come in and go, oh, you guys have drums. Do you have heads? Do you have cymbals?
Yes.
Do you have sticks? Yeah. I would almost start with accessories more than drum kits. I say as I'm going to work for a company that sells drum kits.
No, but that's a good point. That was one of my questions is what should we get into? What should we stock if we're predominantly a guitar place that wants to expand and have a new profit center?
I think a good selection of drum heads is important. And I think that even the basics, 22-inch bass drum heads, snare drum heads, and 10, 12, 13, 14, 16-inch, snare drum and tom heads. It's important to have, but also have the easy upsells, which would be, we've got batter heads. Well, when's the last time you changed out your resonant heads?
Yeah.
There's a lot. I mean, just doing that, just putting a small display of drum heads in opens the door for even more accessories.
Conversations.
Keys and sticks. Yeah, exactly. And it's amazing to me when it comes to drum heads, how many people don't ever change their bottom heads, which is where every bit of tone is coming from.
Yeah.
Well, my drums don't sound that great. Well, you need bottom heads. When's the last time you changed out your bottom heads? Most people go their entire lives.
If they're not ripped or dented, they don't do it. Yeah.
Exactly. But getting back to the original question is how do we get non-drum stores to sell drum products? I think it's peppering in percussion items even. Having 3 kits would be great, but I think that's pie in the sky. Having an accessory wall that's got, it's got your drum heads and sticks, things like that, keys.
Things a drummer can pick up on the way to a gig or something.
Exactly. I think one of the best things, which is the gateway drum, that was horrible. But one of the things I think to have that will go in like an acoustic room is a cajon. The cajon, the participation box. Everybody thinks they can play it.
Yes.
So you throw 3 cajones in where there's a guy playing acoustic. His buddy that doesn't even play drums is going to come in, sit down, and play, and go, "Hey, I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good." But I mean,
I'm a drummer.
I'm a drummer. I drum.
There's another
I'm
opportunity.
A drummer.
But I think it's peppering in. Bits and pieces that maybe people aren't used to seeing in there. I talked to a guy, I think it was last week. It doesn't really matter when it was, but I was talking to a guy in the last couple of weeks, and he was saying that he had a certain drum kit that was sitting on the floor. It had been sitting there for like a year. He was like,
goodness.
How am I going to move this? And he was like, it's a beautiful kit. I had it front, right up front so everybody could see it. Well, from moving house to house, and you guys know from moving house to house, you get clutter blind.
And
you don't see things. And like my wife just did photos, some Natal photos, and we had 2 kits sitting in the living room. We've got a big open living room so she can do photography, product shots and stuff. And so we had these 2 kits sitting in there. They've been sitting there for 3 weeks. Well, I took some stuff back to the warehouse yesterday, and leaving the house yesterday, we looked in the house and went, wow, the house looks so good.
Wow.
We're blind to it. We just didn't see it. Been there for so long. But this guy, this rep went in and talked to the store and said, look, you don't even notice this kit. You do. You see how beautiful this kit is and you're upset that it hasn't sold, but you really don't notice it. And people that walk in have seen it over and over. Move it over here,
Yes.
move something else here, and people walk in and go, something's changed. Wow, look at that kit.
You got a new kit, is what they say.
Exactly.
Yes.
And so that kit belongs there. When it's gone, even if it's 5 feet away, that kit's gone.
Yes.
There's
a
look
new
at that one
kit.
over here. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
So I think moving things around, keeping it fresh. I've said this for a long, long time at Planet Waves, which was a product that still doing actually very well for D'Addario.
Owned by
But it was very small at the time. I think it was a couple of cables and not even tuners. I think it was cables and straps. And well, the boxes were huge, and that was one of the jokes. Is they said, "This is going to be huge," and we go, "Yeah, it already is." Because the boxes were so thick on a wall, you could only get like 3 cables on a wall. But when we had those cables, of course, the cable boxes, they were flat on the top.
Yeah.
Well, if somebody didn't sell through them, dust would settle on the top of it.
Oh, yeah.
And so my whole thing was at the time, this is early 2000s, was to say, you don't have to worry about Guitar Center. You don't have to worry about the guy who's selling a similar product down the street. You have to worry about dust on the product.
Absolutely.
And if you guys aren't in there going in, cleaning it off, it looks old. People see old stuff and go, nobody else is touching that. I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And so I think in retail, keeping your spot clean, nice, moving things around so it seems fresh. I think that's a really good way to do it. But that went way off track of what we're talking about. But
that's actually
great.
Let's talk about. Let's switch gears a little bit, and we may come back. But I'm going to bounce around a little bit, so bear with me. You talk about drum teching.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit more about that, because I know a few people that you've drum teched with, and one of them in particular is we're on a. Anyways, go ahead.
Well,
talk about drum teching.
I was always really good at tuning drums when I was a kid. I had no idea what I was doing, and it took years to find out what I was doing. But I was good at making people's drums sound better. I'm a better drum tech than I am a drummer, and I admit that freely. I'm a decent drummer. I'm a fine pocket drummer. Somebody wants to call me up. I grew up playing punk and rockabilly, and that's what I know. And when I got into college, I was playing with a band that we were playing quite a bit. And I would get people going, "Hey, your drums sound really good. Would you mind tuning mine up?" And I loved doing that. And there were a couple of times at college I went to where there would be bands that would come in. I think the first 2 tech jobs I had was for Restless Heart, a country band, and that ended up being very important to how I got into this industry. And for
Larry Stewart, lead singer.
Yeah, I think that's right. And then I ended up working for John Molo, who was in Bruce Hornsby and the Range. They played at college, and so I get this call from my bass player, who was the stage manager of the auditorium, whatever it was, and he said, "Hey, can you come help this guy? A guy named Gary Grimm, and who's a very famous drum tech." And I went and hung out with him for a full day and just was fascinated with it. And he ended up giving me all of John's old heads and stuff. And I've seen John a few times throughout the years, and he's been very kind, whether he remembered me or not. He's always been very kind.
He said he did.
Because Gary didn't. I saw Gary, was like, "Hey, Gary," and he was like, "Yeah, I don't know who you are." But I really love making other people's gear sound good.
Sure.
And so when we moved to Nashville, I started letting people know, hey, this is what I do, blah, blah, blah. Nobody bid on it. But when I went to work for Gibson, especially during Slingerland, the Slingerland times, I started going out and working with people. And one of the people was Greg Bissonette.
Yes, that's what I was hoping you would say.
I ended up going on the road doing clinics, not touring with him on, for the James Taylor stuff or the David Lee Roth stuff or anything like that, but just in clinics. And so it was, having a tune to the room. It was, changing heads out every night, making sure it's a different kit every night because we didn't travel with a kit. And so I ended up doing that with Slingerland and Mapex for about 7 years with Greg. And,
which Greg, and let's talk about Greg for a minute, is one of, if not the nicest guy that I've ever met.
Oh my goodness,
he's the greatest guy.
He really is. He's tremendous. And his father was actually his drum tech in L.A. And Bud would drive around with all Greg's drums in his trunk and go wherever he needed. And Bud was great. He was fantastic. He was a jazz drummer, and was just the best guy. In fact, I think there were times that I was closer to Bud than I was to Greg.
Oh, wow.
And we went to Germany together, had a blast. It was really, really great. But Greg was a lot of fun, and that really was kind of the benchmark for me on how I tuned everybody else's. I mean, I got to work for Ken Coomer, who was in Wilco in the studio and live quite a few times. But I would get calls to come in and tune in studios and stuff. And actually, Ken got me some jobs, and there were a couple that he said, I can't tell you who the drummer is because you're going to want to hang out all day and can't have it. And I think I ended up working for Charlie Drayton one time, which was huge, and didn't meet him until months after I had done the session.
Oh, interesting.
I got to work with Levon Helm, which for me, being a huge fan of the band, was tremendous. Just a Fishbone one night, which was terrifying. Yeah, I thought I was going to die on that stage. It was so great. But I think P-Funk one night, which I think was the same night. But just, a lot of different people. I've built drums. Big Country. I think I did the last U.S. Big Country show with Mark Rosicki, and Mark's still a really good friend. But, I've built drums for a lot of those guys, and that was great. I got to build Greg Bissonet's Ringo kit was the last kit that I built for Mapex.
Which is a great story of him getting that gig.
Oh, it's tremendous.
Yes.
It's really, really great.
Go tell that story. I think everybody needs to hear that story.
Well, he had played, Greg's a huge Beatles fan.
Beatles fan,
In fact, his whole, for probably 15 years.
Some of his clinics are even just Beatles
Ringo,
stuff. Yeah,
Ringo.
Yeah.
And his clinics always had so much fun. Just everything about him was just hysterical. And so there are so many great memories with being on the road with him. But he, being a huge Beatle fan, I remember I had left Mapex at that point, and he was going to tour with ELO. And so I built him a kit that looked like Ringo's for the ELO kit, or the ELO tour. And it was after that, something had happened, and I had a rough night. I'd gotten off the phone with somebody. I was furious about something, either a store or, at
mother-in-law.
Something like that. Not my mother-in-law. She's the best.
Oh, okay.
She is. So
she's not going to listen
Pam.
to this. She can be honest.
No, so
I'm just kidding.
But I get this call. At like midnight. And I'm like, who is this? And so I'm like, hello? I don't even recognize the number. And I hear, Buddy. I go, Greg? Buddy. And he's just in tears. And I go, what's going on? He goes, I got the gig with Ringo.
Yes.
And it was really cool. And then he goes, here, talk to Matt. So Matt Bissonette was there. And
His
Matt
brother.
goes, hey, Josh.
Yeah, bass
player. And he goes, I got the
yeah.
gig too. So they were going to tour with Ringo.
Oh, I didn't know Matt was with it too.
He did for a while.
Interesting.
And but that's been like his main thing for
it's
got to be 20 years.
Really?
Yeah.
And he's perfect for it, man.
Well, and now backing up, I did a clinic I had him come in.
Yeah.
And I've talked about this. I'm not a Beatles fan. I appreciate what they did. I just think it's just not my cup.
Yeah.
And he did a kind of a tribute to the Beatles kind of thing, and I'm like going, oh, geez, I don't.
But your eyes just opened.
But no, he blew me away because by the way he talked, the way he introduced phrasing on the drums, and I'll never forget because the store was packed, and we had another guy that had a lot of students, so we had a lot of younger people there. And I was like, oh, geez, this is going to bore them to death. And I'll never forget, he was on our stage, and it was glass behind there, and there was parents lining up in the parking lot. And I look up, and it was like 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night. Time went by in like 30 minutes.
His clinics are amazing.
And he was off the charts.
Well, the great thing about Greg, and I could sit and talk about Greg for hours and hours and hours, and some things I can't tell about Greg because they're just too funny, but he makes you feel like you've been best friends with him for years.
Absolutely.
And to actually be really good friends with him is fantastic. I mean, I have tons of great stories about it. I remember going to his house, and he's a multi-instrumentalist. That's what not a lot of people know.
I didn't know that.
Amazing trumpet player.
Interesting.
He's a great piano player.
Really?
Yes. This pilot. No, he's a great. He's a great pianist. And I remember going over to the house when I was at Mapex, and he has his Ringo kit, his Ludwigs, and I think they're 64 Black Oyster Pearls, and so he's like, let's play. I'm like, I can't play with you. You're great. He's like, no, I'm going to play piano. So he starts playing piano, and I sat down, and so he and I played for like
Wow.
A couple of hours. And then I think I've only had 3 lessons in my life. And
you got one that night, right?
I got one that night and went down to, he had the other kit set up in front of, he had 2 kits in his basement. Well, the kit that I had to sit and play was the black and white pearl kit from the Skyscraper tour.
Really?
It was like, whoa, it was really iconic kit. But the other third was taking a lesson with his dad.
How cool is
a brush lesson with his dad in the back of a cab in Frankfurt, Germany.
And he was a killer drummer as well?
He was great. He was awesome.
Yeah.
And the other was Kenny Aronoff, which was
he's a beast.
Yeah. So that was I think it was 17. It was the coolest thing ever. So
wow.
But yeah, I mean, and Greg was just tremendous, and the working for him was really good because, like I said, I got a baseline on how to set up and tune and everything else and figure stuff out. Greg was never, that's off. In fact, he was in town a few years ago, and he was at a local store and he was doing a clinic that night, and I was leaving to go to England the next day, and I went by to see him, and I walked in and he was like, "Josh," he comes over and just huge hugs and everything, and the poor guy behind the counter knew who I was, and he goes, "I've already got his kit tuned up." And Greg goes, "You sure did." And he puts his arm around me and he goes, "Do you bring your key?" So I went over and I was like, "Wow, these are really nice." But
yeah, these sound good.
Trying to tune the bottom head while I compliment the tune. But he was really great to work for. And about that time, I got to meet Jeff Hockley. And Hockley was Billy Cobham's tech. He was Don Perry's tech. He was Steve Smith's tech. I think he's with Blue Man Group. He's out with Cindy Blackman right now.
Wow.
But he was Bonham's tech. And so,
really?
Yeah, for I think 77 through 79.
Wow.
And maybe a little bit earlier than that. And he was in Nashville. In fact, he helped us do our floors on our first house in East Nashville. He was over there every day with a sander. But we were working on a TV show called At the Ryman. Actually, he was, but he brought me in as his second to help. So we got to work for like Paul Lime and
great drummer.
All these different guys that would come on there. And he would really beat into me, "This is how you tune." And I remember going over to his house one night and pulled out this beautiful green Gretsch rack tom. And he'd go, "Tune it up." So I'd tune it up and, it'd hit it and he'd go, "Sounds really good. What'd you do?" And I go, "I don't know. Take it apart." And I mean, this went on and on for an hour. I'm going to get food. I'll be back. And so finally I come back and I tell him what I did. And he was like, "Okay, that's what you got to do." I think I was about to go out on I was with Gibson then, and we were about to go do like 3 days of the International Blues Festival or B.B. King's birthday bash or something like that. And we had like 70 people coming in, so I had to have something that we could tune, from place to place or from kit to kit to kit to make it sound good. And Jeff was instrumental in that. But I fully believe in giving proper credit to everybody, and I give all my practical tuning knowledge I have to give.
You've had an education that's off the charts.
I've been really lucky.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, none of this.
So what are you listening for, or what are you doing to get a great drum tone?
Well, new heads are crucial, and that's why we're talking about in the stores if they want to get into into drums. I think the accessories are extremely important, drum heads especially. I mean, you're a guitarist, you're changing out your guitar strings. It doesn't matter if you've got if you've got a 59 Les Paul Jr. or whatever. I don't know. Do they make one in 59? I don't know.
Yeah, they actually do.
See, I knew that. I just wanted to bring you into the conversation.
Yeah, really. I love drums.
But
they're great.
You don't have the same heads you don't have the same strings on that guitar that you did in 59.
Yeah, no.
And
that'll kill you.
With drums, doesn't matter if they're new or old. That's where everything's coming from. So the bottom heads are crucial, and for stores not to carry bottom heads,
and tell us why they're crucial.
Well, if you look at the drum like this, if you look at it like a trampoline and a catcher's mitt, you want that nice studio bend that people are always trying to get live and in the studio. That bottom head needs to be a little bit higher. And there'll be people that disagree with me, and I that's fine if they've got a different way to tune.
This is your style.
Yeah. But tuning that bottom head about a quarter to a half turn higher allows for the vibration to bounce back up to the top head. The top head being looser is going to grab that sound and it's going to die out, and you're going to get that nice definition. But with the bottom heads being tighter, vibrating more than the top head, it's going to wear
because
that
they're thinner,
out. They're thinner,
and so it
yeah.
does cause more
Why
vibration.
have I seen kits without bottom heads on them then?
Well, concert toms were a big thing, and that goes to Hal Blaine. And when Hal Blaine was recording with like Mamas and the Papas and the Beach Boys and stuff, if you look at the picture, Hal's got a regular 4-piece kit set up, and they just rolled in the concert toms that go around it. But then like Ludwig looked at that and said, we're going to do an octopus. And they actually made a kit with all those things without the double-headed toms that Hal played.
Okay.
And then Hal would go on the road with like Linda Ronstadt and different people like that, and he would use single-headed because he was known for that. And they were, at the time in the 70s, they would die quick. So you didn't have doo, you would have boom.
Well, probably because PA systems
EQing
were different,
problems,
rooms were
and you
different.
could stick a mic right
you
up
could
in
stick
there.
So.
But that's not common practice.
There are a few people that do it. I think Jonathan Mover did it for a while. I'm trying to think who else. Kia Stroud actually is doing it right now.
But Jonathan Movers didn't do it on all of his drums.
No.
He did only on part of it.
Yeah, on some of the stuff. But like I've seen Keo Stroud, who's out with Big and Rich. I think Keo's got a mahogany kit that he's single-headed. You don't see him a lot.
Okay.
I don't think you're going to see a huge return to that just because there's not any tone. It's a tack. And there's no voice behind it.
Yeah.
But that bottom head is
no
all
resonance.
your tone. Right, exactly. Exactly.
Well, I got a question too, even about store owners and trying to get people to carry drums like, a guitar shop like you're talking about. Is it important for people who are just carrying drums to know how to tune drum heads?
I think it's crucial.
So you would have to go through and work with those store owners to make sure that they actually knew how to sell the product properly.
Yeah, I think if you are in a drum shop and you don't know how to tune, you're in the wrong place. That is, it's almost like you work in an auto parts store, but you don't know how to fill up a gas tank. The car's got to run. Yeah. And there are very simple things, and that's a very crucial part to the mechanics of the drum set. With Evans, I ended up doing about 50 tuning clinics a year. So around one a week, I'd go out and do these things, and it was great, and it was amazing, the reaction, because I thought there's no way there's going to be any interest in this. And there'd be nights like I'd have 3 people, which was actually fun because you could sit there with those 3 people and go through and be very in depth and talk about their specific situation. But I'd have nights where there'd be 300 or 400 people.
Whoa!
And they would you'd see people writing down and, hey, I got it. And even now, I'll get people that have gone, man, I met you when you did that, that tuning clinic at wherever it was. And it's a lot of fun. It helps the stores because the stores are going to end up selling more drum heads.
And I think that'd be the point. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that things like that are really crucial to anybody who wants to have a drum department or any department. They need to be able to teach the maintenance on it. Being such a gearhead, I'm into the maintenance of everything. Sure. And Richard knows I've got an old pickup truck that I live under most of the time, and I love working on it and figuring out why is it not running? For
those that don't know, it's a Ford, which I love Ford.
Yes, it's 77 F100.
Yes, great looking.
It'll drive,
even some pinstripe on it.
Little bit of pinstriping.
Yeah, but
it'll drive up the side of a mountain. Yeah. But I've got to know how to work on it to make it work. And I hate to say it, but it seems like with YouTube and all the online services that you can get, the age of the clinic has kind of gone away. And that's a very tough conversation I've had to have with a couple of artists. One in particular who's just a super, super dear friend that I've done 20 years worth of clinics with. That's how he makes his living, his clinics. And it's so unfortunate because people need to see what this guy does live because it will totally blow you away. Greg has done very well with clinics and still is probably the strongest clinician that's out there. But even talking to Johnny Rabb a few months ago, he said the toughest pill for me to swallow was the fact that people could go online and see what I do. They didn't want to see it
But
live.
it is different. You said, totally because different. I did a ton of clinics. I had not only just drummers, but I also had guitar player and bass players in there. Yeah. But it is totally different. It does a lot for the store. It brings a huge audience in.
Yeah.
It gets people fired up. You get to actually see who maybe your favorite drummer in this case, and you actually are inspired and you get to see gear and you get to have sales and there's all this other stuff.
Well, there's a connection that you make.
Yeah, there's a lot of music stores that because of YouTube and because of all this other stuff, they're just like, we're not going to do clinics no more.
Which is a shame.
But it's a huge shame. And I mean, I had a ton of people come in. I love doing clinics because we would pack out a store and there was so much energy in a room and so much excitement that trickled on for probably a month. Because people would come back, or I would give them a coupon, or do something to bring them back in. Mm-hmm. So a lot of music stores are missing out on opportunity because you can give somebody an extra 5, 10, 20% off if they come back with part of their ticket stub because they were at the clinic or whatever. But you're right, being in the audience does an amazing thing where YouTube is fun, it's cool, it's exciting, but being there is something that I think we're missing out and is hugely important.
Well, I think so too. I look at my kids. Here we go. My kids. I look at my kids versus me. I was gone every weekend. I was out trying to find something to do. Yeah. They don't really have to. They can sit and do this.
Oh, absolutely.
Find stuff to do. And I'm fortunate with my kids in some ways that they are very active in different things, and they're gone a lot. Yeah. But I've seen a lot of kids that, and their parents that'll sit there in front of, and video games and everything else. I mean, there was a whole thing a few years ago where we thought, well, the industry's done because of Rock Band. Yeah. Well, that didn't happen.
Nope.
Yeah. That didn't happen. So I hope there is a return to live music. I went to see, 2 weeks ago, my wife and I went to see the Blasters. Mm-hmm. At the Exit Inn, and Blasters have been one of my favorite bands since I was probably 10 or 12 years old. Yeah, and they're old guys now. They're in their 70s. They're in the late 60s and 70s, and it's like these guys are amazing. These guys are amazing, and they kept it together. And there's some people that now, even in buying music, you've got the opportunity just to pick and choose. You don't get the whole thing. And I think my son, a couple years ago, wanted to buy a C.W. Stone King album or a Frank Fairfield, this kind of weird, kind of 20s sounding, jazz blues sort of stuff. Yeah. And he was like, I'm really into this. He said, I think I'm going to buy, I want this song and this song and this song. And I said, no, you're going to buy the whole album because you need that experience. Mm-hmm. When we were kids,
good for you.
You had to buy the whole album. And, I was buying X and Blasters and Los Lobos and Fear and everything I could find. You couldn't buy one song. No, you had to buy, not from those bands, because they didn't ever put out singles. But you had to go through the whole thing, and you learned everything about it. And I think with a clinic, it's the same sort of thing. You don't get to go on and go, I'm going to watch this 3 minutes. You go in and you invest in the time, and you come out fulfilled, I think. Absolutely. And there's a lot of clinics that I've been to that I've left going, well, that was cool, but I'll never be able to do that. There's a ton of clinics I've been to that I've left going, wow, I'm going home, I'm going to try that.
I think if you want, you can always be inspired. And I think that's a lot of times what clinics are for. Absolutely. But a lot of, and a lot of people, they kind of think maybe I'm being a little harsh with this statement, but in my opinion, a lot of this comes down to us. Mm-hmm. I mean, again, I don't want to sound like an old guy, but a lot of it is us. I mean, if I owned a music store, it's my responsibility. I can't blame it on Rockman. I can't blame it on video games. I can't blame it on skateboards. I can't do that. I just have to go, what do I need to do? Right. Mm-hmm. How can I improve the community? What do I need to do to bring people in? And I think that's a big part of the equation with a lot of people is they think they can just open up the doors and people just flock in. Yeah. Right. That's not the case. I mean, and I don't want to go down this road, but I can tell you when I worked retail, we had the same problems. They were just different. Right. Yeah. They were different, but we would sit there and creatively go, what can I do? You talked about that kit that was sitting there that the guy didn't move. We moved the store around all the time. Yeah. It's interesting, and I've told this story before, but we had a Nuno guitar that we just couldn't sell it. Well, we put it at the front of the store when you walk in, and guess who? One of the guy that was interested in it who didn't buy it, him. He came into our store, I don't know how many years ago, and we put this together later on.
Isn't that crazy? I was living in Phoenix going to school. I walked into a store.
Yeah, and it would have been even better if he would have bought it.
I called my dad, asked him for the money, and he was just like, well, how much is it? I don't even remember how much it was now, but
But you should have told me you called your dad. I'd have talked to your dad and made him a sweet deal. I was ready to get rid of that guitar.
You know what I think it came down to is I ended up buying new Ping I2s golf clubs instead. So
that's not a bad choice.
No, it wasn't a bad choice. Well, the new.
But anyways, and again, I don't want to go down that road, but it's ultimately our responsibility.
No, I agree, and I think I'm certainly not anti-technology.
Yeah.
In some ways, I am. I love making stuff,
sure.
At how much can I do without having to go out and buy tools and everything else. I love that, but as someone who's worked retail. When I was working retail in the 80s and early 90s, we didn't have the opportunities that we have now with social media.
No,
and so now you can, if anybody's following you on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, you can put stuff out. Hey, between 3 and 6 today, 25 off on all strings.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can do that every day. You can do stuff. You don't have to hire an advertising agency.
Yes.
You don't have to have your own web page. In fact,
it's got to be creative.
I was looking for something, a local store in the town where I live. I was looking for something to see if they had it in stock, and I went, oh, they've got a web page. I didn't even know they had a web page. Clicked on it, took me right to their Facebook page, and all of a sudden I see all these specials, and I'm going, well, I guess I know where I'm going this weekend. And it's still an old school place, but they've embraced enough technology that guys like me who are trying to find out what they have, who are older guys, are going to take advantage of that.
Interesting. So let's go back to something that we're going to talk. We're going to geek out and talk drums here a little bit.
Good.
Let's talk about bearing edges.
What have we been doing?
How important is bearing edges? And then when we're done with that, before I forget, I also want to go back to some stuff that Nate brought up, and that was a store and tuning drums, and I also want to talk the difference between coated, coated and clear. So I want to go back to that, but first I got to geek out a little bit and talk about bearing edge. What's your favorite bearing edge?
My favorite bearing edge is on the 58 WFL. And it's a round bearing edge on a mahogany 3-ply shell with reinforcement hoops.
Now, why do you like that? Because I don't.
I know, and most modern drummers are not going to like that edge.
You just put me in a pigeonhole right there.
No, because the modern thing is so much wider than the vintage guys. But that rounded edge just creates a warmth that I don't think you can find in a sharper 45.
Now, okay, and now do you have to change your head combination? Is it different than something? Because I like a 45 with a 3/16 counter cut on it.
Right.
I do. I like that thin maple shell, because I love Gretsch. And back when that's what they kind of went for.
Sure.
And I love that sound. But like some of the other brands that had the support rings and the fatter bearing edges, I always felt like I had to change my head combination, and I didn't always like that. So what did you do to get a great drum sound with that?
Well, I think on bearing edges, I think certain shells that round edge works, certain shells it doesn't. I think on a thicker shell that doesn't vibrate as much, like the mid 70s Ludwigs that were fairly thick. I think a round edge would just die out.
Yeah.
It's just not going to give you anything. But we're also talking about a mahogany shell, which is real thin. It's 3-ply. And then it's got reinforcement hoops. And those reinforcement hoops, even though they do focus the tone a little bit more, it's to keep the mahogany from going out of round.
To flex,
On a maple kit, because there's some
harder,
maple kits, it's harder. You don't really need the reinforcement hoops. Even on a 4-ply shell, you don't really need reinforcement hoops. On a 3-ply, you do.
But like most of them were like 6-ply, like on
6 or 7,
stairs.
sure.
Yeah. So
and like I'll tell you probably the best modern thin shell that I've seen, and it's really not even modern. It's 20-something years old now. Is the Star Classics. Those first Star Classics, you could shave with those edges. Those shells were so thin, and they were perfect.
I forgot all about those. That because I bought a Tama kit, and during that time, I remember going, man, I want to get a Star Classic.
There was nothing like it.
Yeah, they were, those shells, I forgot all about those.
They were gorgeous. And everything about that drum was just, that was one of those things that I look back on, even though I am not a modern drum guy. I look back on it and just go, that was great. But, the old Gretsch shells, that great Gretsch sound, that's what everybody has been chasing for years and trying to do. And there are certain things that people do that that you see that Gretsch did, and they try to just do the shell.
Yeah.
But what they aren't doing is they're not doing the weight of the lug. They're not doing the lug,
the
lug
rims,
placement, and
the rims,
the hoops. Yeah, those Gretsch hoops were tremendous. Yeah.
Yes.
And as long as they were the U.S. hoops, they were tremendous.
Yeah,
they were really great.
Because the
die
die-cast hoops make a world of difference, in my opinion.
Sure. I mean, it focuses the drum a whole lot more. If I could buy any product that was made for myself and just sell it as an accessory.
Mm-hmm.
If I owned one product to sell, it would be the old. I think they were called diamond plate. I could be wrong on that. The old Premier hoops, the old Premier die-cast hoops. They were lower mass. They were gorgeous, and as I understand it, the chrome. Again, I'm probably way wrong on this, but the chrome was done in the Jaguar factory. And that's why they were so beautiful.
Really?
But they were lower mass than a Gretsch.
Yeah.
But they had the strength, they had the focus, but they were a little more open.
Okay.
And if I had the money, I'd buy those molds.
Interesting.
Really
I would have to look and see those. I don't recall those.
Really, really pretty.
Interesting.
I got a question. You know, from a perspective of a guitar player here, I'm like totally lost on a lot of this conversation. I will have to admit that when I hear a good drum set, it sounds great. But the key component of that to me is always the snare. If a snare's cutting through and I'm listening to music and it sounds great, to me the whole drum set sounds good. So you guys have been talking a lot about drums. It seems like obviously toms and kicks, but what about snares? I mean, how important are snares? And maybe you guys can kind of geek out about snares for a bit.
Well, then because you get into snare beds and edges. I actually do have some snares that have rounded bearing edges, and so they're warmer. They're not as they don't have the attack that a modern or even a sharper edge snare you were talking about with the 3/16 countercut and the 45. That just lets the seat the head seat
just rest,
and it gives the sound and the vibration direction to go down to the bottom, and it's faster. It's faster sounding. The snare. I mean, here's the funny thing about a snare. Anybody can make a good sounding snare drum. That's the thing. I mean, if you got certain key components in there, like a lot of people like 10-lug pattern. I like 8-lug pattern, so it's a little more open. Mm-hmm. I like triple flange hoops instead of die-cast hoops on most woods, except maple. I like a die-cast hoop. Steel, I like a die-cast hoop. Everything else is 2.3. It's this whole I have to have it this way sort of thing.
The good thing is Nate doesn't know what the heck you're talking about.
This is great, but he's nodding like an idiot.
We're going to do this next week.
It was like you said earlier. It's like when he said something like you've got a great brain, you're like, yeah, or whatever it was. Sure do. Thanks, appreciate it. Well, but listen, like if I go back, you listen to John Bonham. Like in my opinion, that snare sound it doesn't get any better. Now you could listen to Phil Rudd, and I've always gravitated towards rock guys. Yeah. Like that makes the drum set sound.
Yeah. Stuart Copeland.
Yeah,
Stuart Copeland. You look at the difference between Phil Rudd's drum sound or snare drum sound and Stuart Copeland's.
From the Police.
Stuart Copeland sounds like like an oatmeal box that somebody just cranked up, and it'll rip your head off. Yeah. And it wasn't an expensive drum. Yeah. That's the thing, is that it was not that expensive a drum, but it was.
Why did they sound so good back then?
I'll tell you, his tuning. His tuning was.
It sounds low. High. It sounds low and it sounds deep to me. Am I correct?
Well, with Stewart's, it was always fairly high.
Really,
it was
high,
a real nice crack.
Yeah.
Okay. And then you go listen like Steve Jordan, who is one of the greatest studio musicians and just greatest drummers of all time. He's got the same sort of crack coming out of a wooden drum. And it's a little bit different, and the way that he attacks it is a little bit different. So
snares are not normally wooden.
Well, no.
Well, I mean, there's a whole lot.
I know
of stuff.
Marching snares are metal, but
actually marching
a lot of wood.
A lot of wood in the marching.
Yeah.
Because it's lighter.
Okay.
You could make a lighter one. In fact, there is a carbon fiber snare drum that's out there that's really nice. Mm-hmm. But like in drum set snares. With metal, you don't just have metal. You've got steel, phosphor bronze, brass, aluminum, copper. Okay. In fact, DW even makes a concrete snare drum.
What?
Yeah, concrete snare drum, which I've not played.
Yeah,
but I have a buddy that's got
it.
one. And he's like,
really?
I love it. One of the best metal snare drums I ever had. Getting back to Jeff Hockley. Jeff made dangerous Hockley drums. And Jeff's also, and he made those out of carbon stainless steel. The problem, it's the only drum I've ever had fired off of a gig because it was so loud.
Really?
It was so unbelievable. Bass player turned around, looked at me, and said,
"That's enough.
Please tell me you've got your maple drum with you."
Yeah.
And of course, as soon as I switch it out, Jeff comes walking in the back door. "Where's my drum?" You know, that did not go well. But but you know, and he even made steel. He made snare drums out of old Peisty bronze, cymbal bronze, and whole drum kits. But you know, in wood, it used to be, and you know this, if you were 15, 16-year-old and you had a maple drum set back in the mid 80s, you were it. You were the coolest guy ever to walk the planet.
Really?
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely, because maple or birch, and really because of Pearl and because of Yamaha.
Yeah.
You know, the recording custom and the BLX, those were the top birch kits. I'm not a big fan of birch. It sounds good up above it, doesn't have the projection that maple does, so I've always been more of a maple guy.
Yeah, maple.
But now, you know, at Mapex 20 years ago, we did a thing called the Deep Forest, and it was made out of 100% walnut. We were the first ones since like 1928 to do a walnut shell production shell.
Okay.
A lot of people had done a walnut shell, like custom drums, things like that, but not in production. We did a cherry, and the cherry was remarkable.
Which is a great wood.
Very dry, very kind of sandy sounding, but it still had beautiful projection, a lot of really nice resonance. So the materials are all over the place. So now, if you go in and ask for a maple kit, you can get a $2,300 maple kit, or you can get an $899 maple kit. It just depends on the quality of the maple. But when we were kids, it was maple. But as far as a snare drum, snare drums, because they're tuned higher, I think that it's easier to hide imperfections within a snare drum than it is a very simple tom or a bass drum.
Yeah.
Where if you've drilled and your lug pattern's just a little bit off, the drum's not going to tune right. You know, but snare drum, you can just change the hoops out, and you know, on a cheap snare drum, make it sound really great.
Okay.
But I mean, there's something to be said.
Even bad
really
heads,
nice
you can keep a bad head on there and just crank it down a little bit more and get by.
Yeah.
With a tom, you can. It exposes everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So let's get back.
Sorry.
For me, I like going into those conversations, but we put a lot of people to sleep, so let's wake them back up. Getting back to your question, Nate, as far as the guitar shop carrying accessories, let's talk about head combination. So a guitar shop gets drum heads. Should they get clear? Should they get coated? Should they get a combination?
Yeah, I say combination.
Okay, so talk about drum heads and what specifically they can or they should stock.
I would say for tom heads, a selection of double ply and single ply heads, clear and coated.
Okay.
The double ply is going to be a little more controlled.
And forgiving.
And forgiving, tuning-wise and playing-wise. Mm-hmm. And then the single ply is going to be a lot more open, a little bit brighter. The double ply is going to be a little darker. For your resonant heads, again, they're looking at reality. Most of the people that are going to carry a selection of resonant heads are going to carry one thing. They're not going to carry diplomats, ambassadors. They're not going to do that. I would say carry a G1 or Evans G1 or an ambassador weight, and if somebody special orders something, great, but always keep those G1 clears in stock. I'm a little strange when it comes to my drum head combination because I like a very 50 sound, and so I'll use coated top and bottom. Okay. It just mellows out the tone a little bit. Plus, I'm using those round edges, so it's just very round and warm sound. But as far as then you get into bass drum heads and snare heads. I would carry single ply snare drum heads, but ones that have the with and without a dot. Because the dot will last a little longer if somebody's playing in the middle. I've never played in the middle of a drum in my life. I play the whole drum, play the edge. But yeah, I'd say a good selection of double and single ply. When you get into the specialty heads, the pinstripe is always a great go-to for somebody.
Well,
that just
then
wants
don't you
control.
agree that they should have a pinstripe anyways? Because, pinstripe's one of the most common heads, so stock them. But anyways, go ahead.
Sure. No, I think the pinstripe above all other tom heads for a baseline for someone to have, I think that's really important because people know that. It's never really gone out of style. That's the thing is I've always felt like, well, at different times I felt like, well, this is it. Pinstripe's going to go out of fashion, and you still sell tons of them.
Okay.
a coated is more of a slap than a punch. If you know what I mean.
He's been slapped a few times.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
But
A few times.
but it's warmer.
Okay.
And there's more attack with a clear head than there is with the coated head, because a coated kind of absorbs that attack and gives you a very warm sound. And then bass drum heads. The EMAT is a tremendous bass drum head.
Yeah.
It's a remarkable bass drum head.
Yeah.
The EQ series from Evans is really nice, but the Power Stroke from
Power
Remo
Stroke
is really
3,
great.
yeah.
Power Stroke 3 is a tremendous head.
Yeah.
That's kind of the go-to.
Okay.
But,
Well, and a lot of times guitar players, I know this is going to be kind of a strange comparison, can take guitar strings and kind of compare to heads. If you have coated strings, you get the same tonal sound as you would with a coated head.
Yeah.
A lighter string or a thinner head. I mean,
Sure.
you can kind of make some comparisons.
Yeah,
it's not
absolutely.
accurate, but you can still kind of get the gist
idea.
of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And going back real quick on bearing edges, one of the things for a guitarist to be able to understand the importance of bearing edge, it's the bridge. It's the bridge on your guitar. If you've got a sharp bridge,
Yeah.
the string's
So the
gonna be-
bearing edge is where the head goes over and
Where
gets
it touches,
stretched,
right.
right?
Sets
Okay.
on there.
So I mean, if you had a very sharp, bridge, then the strings would be a lot more lively. But if you rounded that out, they'd be a lot more subdued, and that's kind of the difference.
Yes,
As a music
exactly.
store owner that's just getting into drums, do you need to have you said 3 kits possibly to get started. I mean, is this something to where you have different kits with different bearing edges, different heads, so you
Not
have variety,
necessarily,
or
not necessarily, because I think the sharper edge kit is what most people are gonna. You're not gonna get a parent coming in going, I want to spend $700, but they better have rounded bearing edges. You're not going to get that. It's going to be more like guys like us.
Well, and here's the thing, and you can back me up on this. Hopefully, guitar players won't even talk about bearing edges when they're dealing with that. That's a subject that doesn't need to be discussed.
Well, I didn't know
Not that it's important, but it's information that mom's going to stand there going, "What the heck are you
She's
talking
never
about?"
gonna get it. Yeah.
And it's not worth that. I mean, I would say, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is a couple starter kits and maybe a good intermediate kit.
Sure. Yeah.
And then you can always special order a higher end kit or whatever. But you don't need to invest a whole lot of dollars at first, and then you can just grow it from there.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to broaden your offering, I think, and any retail store needs to broaden its offering.
Okay.
And I think it's funny. I think businesses, marriages, and churches, the reason they break down is because people say, well, that's just the way we've always done things.
Yeah.
And you can't do that. You do have to change.
Okay. Hey, obviously to plug where you work now, is Ludwig a great brand for somebody who's just getting into drums to carry?
Yeah, because I mean, there's entry level accent stuff going all the way through. An intermediate maple
Accent
kit
is
the
brand.
entry level.
Okay.
And I hope. I'm still learning.
Yeah.
I'm learning. But then, you get up into the higher price range of stuff, which is actually not that bad. The stuff that, we like, the rounded bearing edges, and, you've got a thin shell versus a thick shell. And yeah, I mean, that's the great thing about Ludwig. Starting in the early 80s, they came out with the rocker, and they may have come out ahead of the export. I'm not really sure if they did or not. I would say it's pretty close, because
that was a huge kit when it came out. The rocker,
yeah, absolutely.
That was big time. I had a friend. I had several friends that had that kit. Yeah,
I remember.
I forgot all about it until you just brought it up.
Well, I mean, it had features that nothing else had. I remember. I didn't even know Modern Drummer existed until like 86, 87, after I had been playing forever.
The magazine?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I remember walking into a store going, oh, what is that? And picking it up, and I was hooked.
Changed
and
your
still
life.
am,
Yeah.
And I remember walking into, I think I got it in like a drugstore on the way to school, and I got into chemistry class.
Are we still talking about drums?
Yeah, we are.
Okay.
And I sit down and open it up, and on the inside front cover is the Ludwig rocker ad. And my buddy, Damon McClurg, sitting next to me. He was a senior, I was a sophomore.
Yeah.
And he leaned over, he goes, oh, it's awesome.
Wow.
Just looking at that. And when we sat there looking at that
Just
ad,
staring at it.
it was an intermediate kit. It was not even a professional kit. It was a drum
cool.
kit.
It looked cool.
It was amazing. And you sat there looking at it, and it was the greatest thing ever. And, I think it's really important to know that companies like Ludwig have been investing in students and the growth of that student through their entire line for a long time. A lot of companies have, but
excellent.
I mean, the Rocker's the one that stood out to me when I was a kid.
Now, so you were talking about the accent kit, but Ludwig has done a very good job to have all price points covered.
Sure. Yeah.
Starting from the start to even from a beginner and intermediate, there's still kits that fall
Absolutely.
under that line.
Yeah.
So if you walk in and your son or daughter's really into drums, and there's an accent, which is a good kit, but you're like, let me bump them up a little bit.
Absolutely.
They have a lot of offerings there too as well.
For sure,
right?
because you can get into a price point that's about $6.99 with hardware.
Okay.
And it's a good drum.
It's a good drum.
Yeah.
It's a really good drum. I saw a review done on the done on their intermediate maple kit a couple days ago, and they swapped out the heads, but that kit was amazing. It sounded great. Of course, the guy playing it was phenomenal too.
Yeah,
but
that always helps.
and that's one thing that retail stores need to be able to pass along when parents are buying drums, and there's an opportunity for them to sell more product to them. Upsell with a new head pack. One of the things that in drum manufacturing that we have to do is we have to find a way to get it to market with as little not overhead, but as little cost as possible.
Okay.
And it's very expensive to put out a drum kit.
Yeah.
It's very, very expensive. Heads are a big part of that. So when you see a drum come in, and it's generally that intermediate level, low end, you're not going to get the best heads. Because we've got to keep that price low so that people can afford it.
Absolutely.
Play those heads, wear them out, then get new heads.
Yeah.
But I've had parents go, well, you set us up to have to buy. It's like, no, we wanted to keep the price low, because I guarantee you go and put good heads on them, all of a sudden that $6.99 kit is $8.99.
Yeah.
People are going to just
pass it by.
Yeah,
Sure.
just
and you
throw
got to
a fit.
replace them. I mean,
You have to.
I've
It's a
had people
disposable
walk in
item.
and go, well, I didn't know these sticks were breakable.
Sure.
And it's kind of the same thing with heads. I mean, you've got to swap them out.
You do.
After a while.
You do.
Hey, we're getting a message from our producer that maybe we need to start wrapping things up.
All right.
You guys don't even realize we've been talking for 6.5 hours.
Yeah.
And
we can do it another 6.5 too.
Sure.
So I didn't know if you had one final question that maybe you think Josh needs to touch on or to wrap things up.
I
and
do.
bring
I
it back
have.
around.
Well, I have several, but one. Where are you going to be in 5 or 10 years?
Man, I really, really hope that I am with Ludwig. I would like to put in the time and to do that. I think the very fortunate thing about working at a company like Ludwig Conselmer is the ability to be able to move up
And grow.
and grow. And it's not a thing about I want more money and power. I don't want that. I love the drum industry. My entire life, this is what I've wanted to do. And I was the kid that had teachers going, you really need to learn a skill.
what you
because
love.
You're never going to do anything in music.
I don't foresee you as being a doctor. Yeah.
No, I don't think so. That wouldn't fly. But I really hope that it's helping take Ludwig to that next level.
Good.
The company's never gone away. It's always been strong. There have been down years. There's been down years for anybody, but it's a very, very strong name. I mean, it's one of the big 3 American companies, if not the top American company that's gone back for years and years and years.
Yeah.
I'm very honored to work there, and I just hope I'm in a place where I've helped grow the company even more, and hopefully internationally as well. It's when I've told people about the change that I'm making. They're surprised because of my connection, my connection with Natal that I've had for 5 years. And there's no bad blood. There's no bad feelings. These are people that I truly, truly love.
Yeah.
But they're set up that they're in a better position that I can move on now, and they'll be well taken care of. With Ludwig, I just would like to be involved with them as long as I can. And it's an iconic brand. For me, as a 14-year-old kid, opening up Modern Drummer magazine. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
It's a big deal for me, and I don't want to let them down.
Awesome.
Well, congratulations.
Yes.
on that.
Thank you, guys, and thanks for having me. I
congrats.
really appreciate it.
We're excited. We're excited for your future. So we got through probably half of the questions, but
That was a whole lot of information.
it was a lot of stuff. So guitar players, don't turn this off. Listen to it. There's a lot of good information there. Thank you for that. But we want to encourage all the music stores out there that don't carry a lot of drums to dive into it. Not to be afraid.
Right.
You know, so yeah, I mean,
It's a very simple thing.
yeah, they're not as complicated as we may make them out, because a lot of times as drummer we have to act and sound smart.
Right.
You know,
We're just
it's-
cavemen.
We're always getting beat up, you know,
Right.
so we have to. But yeah, they need to experiment. It's a new profit center. They need to open up
sure.
a profit center, not just carry guitars, not just pigeonhole yourself, but open up, because there's a lot of product out there to sell. Drums is one of them. You know, thank you for helping us out with that.
Thank you guys
we,
for having
we
me.
will do
It's an
this
honor.
again in
Yeah.
the future after you've kind of been with Ludwig for a while.
Right.
We can
That'd be
ask
great.
more questions. I'd love to hear an update. Super
Yeah.
excited for you and
Sure.
your family.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
You got a great family,
Thanks, man.
and
As do you.
appreciate you. Thank you. And so, you want to close us out, Nate?
Yeah, man, we appreciate it. Josh Touchton. Oh, hey,
we
and
got
Richard's
a gift
got the
to you.
shirt. We
Yes,
always have to give
we got
away
a
a shirt.
gift, so you got to.
Beautiful.
And if you want to know what it looks like really well,
Yeah.
this is
That's
what
awesome.
it is. you know.
We have him here to be a model.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Is there more room in the gut?
Yeah.
Well,
great.
They're
we have
stretching.
a size comparisons. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't compare sizes.
Thank you so much.
Yo. On that
Anyways,
note,
yeah, man, we appreciate it. Hey, everybody out there listening, thanks for tuning in, man. This was a special episode, just because Josh is a killer dude, man.
Yeah.
All right, we
Thank you,
appreciate
guys.
it. Thanks.
Mhm.